Okay, these notes are for division with decimal quotient, and that means that you are doing division and your answer will be a decimal. So you need to have this page of notes in front of you. We're going to fill this in. If you don't have this, you'll have to copy down what we already have here onto either a blank page, note page, or some binder paper. So I'm going to make this bigger. And we'll start with our definitions. So remember that a dividend is the number being divided. So write that down, the number being divided. The divisor is the number that divides the dividend. And the quotient is the answer. So if we have the problem 20 divided by 4 is 5. I want you to pause the video for a minute and see if you can draw a line from each of these terms to the part of the problem it is. Go ahead and pause. So you should have understood that a dividend, the number being divided, is this. 20 is the number here that is being divided. The divisor, the number that divides the dividend, is 4. 4 is dividing 20, and the quotient is the answer. So you should have on your note page these three terms, their definitions, this diagram, and these arrows. Okay, let's write some notes. Let's remember our terms for writing for the steps for division. Dad, mom, sister, rover. So remember, dad meant to divide, so you can just put the symbol for division. Mom meant to multiply. Sis was subtract, and rover was to repeat. And then what I want you to write here is that when a dividend is too small, comma, add a decimal and a 0. So when a dividend, remember that's a number you're dividing into, when a dividend is too small, add a decimal and a 0. And this is super, super important. So go ahead and put a cloud around it. That's to help this note stand out on this page of notes. So if you're looking back to this to get some help, this will help you see it right away. All right, so we're going to take a look at how this idea of when the dividend is too small, add a decimal and a 0, how we use that in a division problem. So we have the problem 65 divided by 12. So 12 does not go into 6. This idea of when the dividend is too small, add a decimal and a 0 doesn't apply here because I have another digit I can divide into. So 12 does not go into 6, but it does go into 65. And here you've got to do a little bit of guess and check. I happen to remember, because I know my 12s facts, that 12 times 5 is 60. So 12 goes into 65 5 times. And remember, I'm putting the number that is, every time I divide, I put the answer on the line. This is the line I'm talking about. So I 12 goes into 65, 5 times 5 goes on the line, and it goes over the last digit that I divided into. And then I multiply. Okay, so remember, divide, daddy, multiply, mommy. So I'm going to multiply my quotient times my divisor. 12 times 5 is 60. And then I subtract. That's my third step. 65 minus 60 is 5. Now I have to think about this idea when the dividend is too small, add a decimal and a 0. Well, 12 cannot go into 5, and I don't have any other numbers to bring down here. So I'm going to add a decimal and a 0. Okay. Now I can divide 12 into 50, and I know that 12 times 4 is 48, so 4 goes up on the line. 4 times 12 is 48. That was my multiplication. And then I'm going to do my subtraction. Now 12 does not go into 2, so my dividend is too small. I already added a decimal here, and I'm not going to add another decimal into my number. So from this point on, I can just add the 0 part of that direction. 12 goes into 20. Well, 12 times 2 is 24, so it can only go in one time. So I put a 1 on the line, and then I write 12 because I multiplied 1 times 12 is 12, and then I subtract. Now I get an 8. 12 cannot go into 8, so again I have to add a 0. I don't add a decimal. Once I add the first decimal, I'm done adding the decimals. And then 12 times, 12 times 6 is 72. So I'm going to put 6 on the line. 6 times 12 is 72. That's my multiplication step. Now I'm going to do my subtraction step, and I get 8. Now at this point, I can see that I'm going to continue to get 8 when I do my subtraction, right? 12 goes into 8. I would add my 0. 12 goes into 86 times. 6 times 12 is 72. And you can see that that pattern is going to be repeating. So that tells me that I'm going to have a repeating 6. So I can just put that little line over my first 6, and I'm done. So let's fill in these squares here. Up at this point, 12 does not go into 5, so I added a decimal and a 0. That's what I want you to write here. 12 does not go into 5, so add a decimal and a 0. Okay, you can pause the video if you need to get this written in. 12 does not go into 5. 12, that should have been, I'm sorry, it was right here. 12 does not go into this 5 right here, so I added a decimal and a 0. I'm going to draw, I'm going to draw an arrow. To my decimal and my 0. Okay. Now in this second box, I'm going to write 12 does not go into 2. So I'm referring to this step right here where I had a remainder of 2. 12 could not go into 2, so I had to add just a 0. So you're going to write 12 does not go into 2. You already added a decimal, so just add a 0. 12 does not go into 2. You already added, this is at this point, so we subtracted 50 from 40. Okay, I just saw a mistake here. This should have been a 48. So when I subtracted 48 from 50, I got a 2. Then I wanted to divide again. 12 did not go into 2, so I added a 0, and I had already put a decimal, so I just needed to add a 0. So this is the note you're going to put in the second box. And in this last box, we're going to note that we see a pattern where we are going to continually get the answer 8, which we turn into 80, that we have a repeating decimal. So in the box down here, we're going to write, see the pattern that indicates a repeating decimal. See the pattern that indicates a repeating decimal. And then I want you to draw an arrow to the 80s to show that, oh yeah, there's the pattern. We're going to subtract and get 72. We have 80, we subtract and get 72. Now we have a practice problem, 52 divided by 16. So you might want to do a little guess and check here, right? So 16, I'm going to do my, now I would prefer when you are doing homework or classwork that your guess and check, any notes like that, you always put on your paper right next to your problem. On this guess and check, you can do, since it's in notes and we want our notes to be very clear and easy to read, we'll do our guess and check on a separate piece of paper. I'll do mine here, but you will do yours on a separate piece of paper. So I'm going to just give a guess of 16 times 3. Okay, 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So 16 times 3 is 48. I know that has to be it because I can't add another 16. So I'm going to put my 3 over the 2 because I divided into 52. So my 3 will go here. And now, so I did my first step. I divided and I put my answer on the line. Remember, every time you divide, put your answer on the line. So 16 times 3, then that's my second step. Multiply is 48. And then my third step is to subtract. So 52 minus 48 is 4. Now 16 does not go into 4, so I'm going to add a decimal and a 0. Oops. So here is my decimal, and here's my 0. Okay, so if 16 times 3 is 48, I think that I'm going to have to go 16 times 2, and I know that that's 32. Okay, so I'm going to put my 2 up here. 2 times 16 is 32, so I did my multiplication. Now I'm going to do my subtraction. 40 minus 32 is 8. 16 does not go into 8, so I'm going to have to add a 0. Now I'm going to divide. 16 goes into 80. Well, I know it has to be more than 3 times. So let me try 16 times 4. Well, 16 times 2 is 32. 16 times 4 is 64. That's not quite enough. Let's try 16 times 5. Oh, look at that. So 16 goes into 85 times. 5 times 16 is 80. I multiply, then subtract, and I get 0. So remember, if you want to check this, and this would be a moment that would be fine to use a calculator, you would multiply 3.25 times 16, and it would be equal to 52. And another little hint is when you're doing your guess and checks, don't erase or scratch out these numbers, because the longer this problem is, the more you might be able to reuse the work that you've already done. So always leave your guess and checks someplace where you can find them. Under special notes, I want you to write that every time you divide, put your answer on the line. Every time you divide, put your answer on the line. Okay, so every time you divide your divisor into anything in here, anytime you divide, you've got to remember to put your answer on the line and do that before you do anything else. Okay, that is dividing with a decimal remainder.